Hello and welcome to the Night Owl Philanthropy podcast. What is your why? I'm your host, Dean Jones, and in this series, I ask charity leaders and change makers to tell us about their why, the purpose, experiences, and values that drive their work. Each episode goes beyond campaigns and job titles to uncover the real stories and motivations behind social impact leadership, exploring what it takes to stay resilient, purposeful, and compassionate in a demanding sector. And today we're leaning into those themes from the perspective of Autism Early Support. And I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Sweet Rowley from Autism Early Support in Buckinghamshire, an organisation that provides early support, education and practical guidance for autistic children and their families, helping them to access the right support at the right time. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. Let's begin, as we always do, with that key question. What is your why? Coming from the northeast of England to leading a specialist Buckinghamshire charity, what first drew you to working for and leading Autism Early Support?
Well, I think like a lot of people, after COVID, which was a very high pressured time, it was time for me to do something different. So at the time I worked for a hospice and I came through the other end of that and decided it was time to go and find a new challenge. And that's what I did. And I was really attracted to AES because of the specialism they provided, because they arrived with a family at a time so critical for them. And that was very similar actually to the kind of provision that I'd seen in hospices. So, you suddenly a family is in the company of specialist support and they go from having that period of complete panic, fear, not having anywhere where to turn, not knowing where to turn, and then a specialist team step in. And I recognised that very early on with the provision at Autism Early Support. It was families with young children who were looking for some answers, looking for some direction, and looking to be held, and that's what the charity did then when I joined 5 years ago. And we still do it now, and I'm super proud that I'm a part of that. But yeah, I was hooked from very, very quickly when I met them. So yeah, it was the right job for me at the right time.
Great. And you mentioned that you came from a hospice environment.
Yeah.
And I imagine that was dealing with people who are of an older age group. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly, although it was an adult hospice. It was a hospice providing palliative care to adults. But very often we were supporting families who had very young adults,
Right.
like sort of 20 plus often.
Mm.
And so a very different experience. Not everybody was elderly, but certainly the impact was when a specialist team comes in and when you have palliative support around you is incredible. I mean, it is incredible. And it leaves that profound, impactful place in people's life journeys. It stays with families for a long, long time when they've had care like that.
It might sound like a strange question because the answer is, why wouldn't you do that? But why do you think it is? What draws you to wanting to support people generally? And in both instances, I think we'd say that we're talking about vulnerable people, both old and young and somewhere in between. Do you have any sense about what it is that draws you to that work?
Well, I think, in both of those scenarios, both of those environments that I've been in, we are talking about fairly basic human rights. So I guess that's where that passion lies. I'm a mom of 3 kids. They went through school. School was critical. But when I reflected on it, their experience of school and our experience of school was fairly straightforward. Yeah. So you live in a village, your children go around the corner to school. And I honestly took it for granted until I arrived in this place where actually that wasn't a given. That isn't a given for the families that we support. Often children have to travel for miles. Often there is no choice in your area of a school that meets their children's needs. And that gets more complicated as children get older. So it felt like, I was drawn to this purpose for helping people to have those things that were critical to foundations and things that we probably do take for granted, but actually it felt so important to enable families to access that and to lead a team of people who are specialists in providing that support at the right time. Those foundations was something that felt very special to be a part of.
Mm.
And that is still why I do what I do now. You
Mm.
know, I want those families and those children to have the support that they need at the right
Mm.
time that's right for them. And
Mm.
that just feels really fundamental, really, to so many things.
Great, thank you. So when people actually ask, what do you do? How do you introduce Autism Early Support and your role as CEO within that?
Well, do you know what? I don't actually like describing I often say things like, I recognize this in myself. I skirt around the edge of it a little bit. So I
Mm.
say things like, well, I work for a charity. And people will ask me what I do. And so it's only kind of when I'm forced to actually describe my job that I do. And I can't really explain that. So I often use words like, oh, well, I lead a charity called, or I run a charity called.
Mm.
I prefer to talk about the charity far more than I like to talk about myself and the role I play in it.
Mm. Is that feeling of like imposter syndrome around having a
Yeah,
role
for
like it
sure.
is?
Certainly for a
Right,
while
okay.
it was. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was for a long time.
And that comes up quite a lot in the conversations that I've had so far. And over time, are you becoming more comfortable about that, or does it
Yeah,
not really go
5
away?
years in, maybe it's taken
Yeah.
about this long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Okay, great. And obviously before early autism support, you mentioned about your career in hospice work. I think you had a career in marketing and communications prior to
Yeah,
that
I
as
did.
well.
I did. And that
Was there a
still
mo
has been good. You know, they're still great. They're skills that I've brought into every single job I've
Yeah.
done. I've moved further away from actual kind of delivery elements, but they're still so important to the work that I do now.
Was there any moment within that sort of journey, for want of a better word, where neurodiversity crept into the themes of your work and made that work feel in some way personal and could sort of give you a reason as to why you've landed where you are? Was anything in the past that's kind of informed your decision to work with young children with neurodiverse conditions?
Not specifically neurodiversity. I guess inclusion always felt important to me.
Hmm.
Inclusion and equity and
Hmm.
fairness,
Hmm.
social justice.
Hmm.
You know, they were drivers for me.
Hmm.
Mm, working things out for people, kind of tackling some of those really those kind of wicked issues.
Hmm.
That was more important, I think. Or they were the drivers really, more than it being specific cause related.
Hmm.
And actually moving into this field has been fascinating for me. And
Mm.
if I had more time, I would go back and study. I would go back and try to get closer to understand the kind of neurodevelopmental conditions,
Hmm.
how people respond to things. I think it's fascinating, and I never tire of learning more about it. And I learn from my team all of the time, and
Mm.
I love that side to the job. I love
Mm.
it. And I also love the interaction that we have with families, and
Hmm.
being around the children is love. So I love being in that family space and in amongst the children. Although I don't do it that often because
Mm.
where I'm based
Hmm.
is not always on the same site as the children. But when I am there, I absolutely love it. And it's so good to go back when I might have a day of lots of meetings, or I might be spending quite a lot of time looking at spreadsheets and that kind of thing. But
Mm.
then balancing that with time with the children is the
Mm.
best. It is
Mm.
so uplifting and a great reminder for why we do what we do.
So you mentioned that you don't like necessarily talking about your role as CEO. One part of the question was about what Autism Early Support actually do. How would you describe AES's mission? Obviously, they were it was called the Puzzle Centre, I think, at one time as a preschool.
Yeah, so it started out as being 25 years ago as being primarily an early years service.
Hmm.
Started in our founder's home. her interest was specialist education, and she set up a small classroom environment in her home, which gained more popularity every year. That provision grew into the charity, and they moved to a location which became home and which became the puzzle centre. It ran as such for the best part of 10 years, really, and then everybody involved in the charity at the time realised that they could expand their provision to support more families who had children who were older than those preschool years. So that's when they grew an outreach provision.
Okay.
And with the growth of an outreach provision, which was therapists working in children's homes or in schools, or us taking specialist teaching into classrooms,
right,
being termed a puzzle centre, which was the nursery name effectively, was no longer broad-reaching enough. It didn't kind of capture the actual full extent of what the charity was about. So that's when they became Autism Early Support, and Puzzle Centre was renamed as Circle Centre. So the charity grew then from being a nursery into being a much wider service. The nursery is still very much the kind of showcase of what we do. We model best practice there, and the kind of principles of our approach: early help, child-led, neurodiversity affirming. All of those things transcend into the wider service. Autism Early Support is a much, much bigger charity now, and a much bigger reach than we've ever had. So we've evolved enormously, and with that, our reach has grown. And the breadth of what we do is much greater as well.
And you've said, I think, in the past that you're driven to solve problems in the charity sector. So how does early autism support represent that sort of challenge for you personally? What challenges are you trying to solve at AES?
I think, we are very much part of the system. So the system of provision. And so that's the kind of, let's broadly call it the system of SEND, the provision of special education, supporting children with special educational needs and disability. And one of the challenges, I guess, that we're navigating is how we can inform that system, how we can enhance it, how we can work with it, how our families can work with it, and how we can help to improve it alongside our own strategic direction. Those two things have to work well together. I see that provision as a key part of our stakeholder relationship management. The two things can work well when working in tandem. But of course, it's a huge, unwieldy piece that's influenced by so many moving parts and factors that we struggle to impact. Sometimes you feel like a tiny cog in that massive wheel. But that continues to be an area of work that I know that we can add value to, that we can inform, we can represent our families through those changes. And finding that balance is really key. Finding that balance of being able to run our service as we know it needs to be run, and supporting that wider infrastructure as well.
And you mentioned families then when you were answering the question. Having children and bringing children up is a challenging experience in itself.
Absolutely, it is. Yes.
And I think you add a layer of that sort of a neurodiverse condition like autism into the mix. That presents a much bigger challenge for some parents, and that can take its toll sort of emotionally and in all sorts of other ways. And I'd be interested to know how those families reach you to help them address some of those challenges. Because I'm assuming that's what you see as doing. It's helping them to support them with some of those challenges. So what does their story look like when they first connect with you, and how do they find you, and what happens beyond that?
Yeah, so people generally find us at a local level because of word of mouth.
Yeah.
So if your child is under 5 and you're looking for a specialist setting in Buckinghamshire, it's very hard to find a service that's just like ours. There's so few of them. There's lots of nurseries who provide some brilliant support for children within a mainstream setting, but rarely do you find a setting that's entirely set up to meet the needs of children with a social communication or interaction difference, which is our provision.
Mm-hmm.
So some families will go find us by their own searching. They're trying to find that provision because they've identified those needs. Other families are recommended by others. Some may come through a GP pathway because a GP has advised, health visitor, friends, families, etc.
Okay.
So for the nursery, that's generally how people find the service.
Mm.
If people are accessing our wider services, so like therapy provision, etc., that's often through a bit of internet searching, again, by word of mouth recommendation.
Mm.
We're fairly easy to find. I guess, we're fairly well established. We have a lot of referrals in from people who've not formal referrals, but recommendations, because we've been providing a similar service for a very long time. So anybody working across the early years sectors or SEN sector across the county will be fairly familiar with our service. Now, when families do find us, they will be at very different stages on their journey. For some families, they may have siblings who have been on similar pathways. There'll be families who are just exploring the possibility that they may have noticed differences in their child and they're exploring they have some early questions.
Mm-hmm.
There are some families who are very learned and know exactly what they need, and others really are just starting out. I'd say what they mostly have in common is a sense of often being quite upset, distressed, distraught. Many times they've been in scenarios where they've been just kind of highlighted towards all of the things their children can't do rather than the things they can. So they're arriving at a place of kind of fear, sometimes desperation, because often their children are unhappy. Whatever, they'll have a range of unmet needs, which will be very different according to each child's presentation. But because those needs are being unmet, it usually presents as some form of unhappiness or dysregulation. So poor sleeping, not able to comfort themselves or find comfort from others, not able to express their needs or their preferences, not able to manage common everyday situations, scenarios, highly distressed over new circumstances. It can be a range of things, but they're presenting in a way that family themselves are upset. They're looking for solutions to be able to comfort and support their children. And we might be the last people they've spoken to. They may have tried all sorts of different options before they find us. And we try to be that place where you arrive and you feel held, you feel understood, you feel that, okay, there are going to be families here who might be experiencing the same things as we have. Our tolerance level for difference is a given. We understand children who have restricted diets. We understand children who play and choose to play on their own, and we help maybe with that reframing of perspective so families can start to feel more comfortable with all of the things that are their children's strengths, and you're just guiding them with that navigation of what next and helping them to advocate for all of those different needs.
Great, thank you. That was a really good insight. So what does sort of early intervention mean in practice for a child and their family through nursery and outreach services? Is intervention about solving? It's not a challenge that necessarily has a solution, is it? It's about managing the challenge in a way that's positive and productive for everybody concerned, I imagine. Is that right?
Yeah. And, everybody will have their own sense of what a solution looks like. But for us, fundamentally, it's about providing a range of reasonable adjustments and supports that look at the environment and the support around the child to help them be able to feel comfortable in that space. What we don't advocate for is for the child having to become different in the environment. It's about making adjustments to the environment for the child.
Mm.
And that's the kind of fundamentals of a neurodiversity affirming approach, which is
Mm.
our practice.
Mm.
We spend a lot of time looking at the child as an individual, developing a kind of individualized support plan.
Mm-hmm.
And early support would be something that we'd always advocate for, so that because the sooner a child's needs are understood,
Mm.
the more you can work towards supporting those. There's less chance of things becoming exacerbated, less trauma as a result of needs not being met for a long time, less chance of masking, let's say, where a child is trying to fit into a space and manage it and then faces burnout later.
Mm.
Delayed support can lead to heightened anxiety later years, maybe a child finding it just school all too exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
and just maybe can't even go in.
Mm.
And our model would be to try and get as much support in and around the child as possible
Mm-hmm.
from as early as possible,
Mm-hmm.
so that both the family and all of the people working with that child can understand them and navigate those supports and environments around them.
Mm.
And obviously every single child is completely different.
Mm.
So for some children, specialist school will be the best option. For others, they may be able to find a happy route through mainstream if that right
Mm-hmm.
support is in place. And every single child and family we meet has got that unique support plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that early intervention for one could look quite different for another.
Great, thank you. Now, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you've reached quite a major milestone. You're in your 25th year, it's your 25th
Yeah.
anniversary. First of all,
Yeah. Amazing.
congratulations on that achievement. That's a fantastic achievement for any charity, I think, to reach that, because it's tough going running a charity, and there's all sorts of challenges and things that get in the way of any achievement. So congratulations, particularly with things like the pandemic and COVID getting in the
Yeah.
way. That's been
Amazing.
quite challenging.
Amazing. It is really incredible.
You've been with the organisation since 2021. Are there any sort of points in that last sort of 5 years or so where you felt really proud of the impact that you've had as a leader? I know you'll probably be quite modest and say, "Well, it's a team thing," but as a leader, you also you're there to to help move things along. Are there things that you've done that you feel sort of quite proud of?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many. Some will be like, those kind of daily transactions between families and with children, and seeing a member of the team with a child, watching a child go from being almost unable to leave mum to having fun, asking for things, choosing the play he prefers,
Mhm.
running around independently in a
Mhm.
nursery, using a communication aid to show one of the team what he wants.
Mhm.
I see that every single time I go to nursery. So
Mhm.
they're the kind of daily highs, if you like. There is nothing that I feel, when I take somebody to look at nursery and I show them the work that we do,
Mhm.
I couldn't feel more proud of that
Mhm.
provision. I couldn't feel more proud of that space and the people I work alongside who do what they
Mhm.
do. The other huge development that's really shifted the way we deliver our service has been the growth of our parents portal.
Mm.
So when I joined in 2021, we were coming out of the pandemic, and we were looking at how the service could evolve and how we could manage this huge demand, really.
Mhm.
we would be contacted by families all of the time. And what we didn't want to do was add them to another waiting list.
Mm.
We didn't want to send them on to go and get support elsewhere. We wanted to be able to support them ourselves. And we knew that the only way we could do that was to develop a fully fledged digital offer. So we'd started to do some of that work during COVID. The team had offered workshops online. We'd done some therapy provision, actually, virtually. But actually, the growth of our workshop provision was established. But we knew that we could do more. So we secured funding in the first year that I was there. We envisioned what that could look like, what our own platform could look like.
Mm.
And we turned it into a reality. So we secured the funding and we did 18 months of research and we launched it.
Mm.
And we now have over registered users on this platform.
Well.
Using that service as and when they need it, as with any platform like that, you've got your active users, you've got people who will pop in and need it and get a question answered and not use it again for 6 months.
Mm.
But, the point is we launched something that felt like a huge step change for us. And we went live and honestly, it's been just nothing more than a positive success story.
Mm.
It's fun. It kind of, around its basics, it works really well. So, if you go in and use it, it's dead simple to use. It works. It's practical. It's mobile friendly. The content is curated and built and created by our team. So it's robust, it's reliable, it's trustworthy, it's practical, it's supportive in its nature. So families are going away with this endless wealth of access to support in libraries. They can meet other people, they can log on to parent support groups, they can go on workshops. Yeah, they can go in a forum. And the feedback is exceptional. The feedback is phenomenal. People are saying things like, with this information, I've changed the way we parent our child. I now know what to do. I now feel less alone. I've met other families who are like me. It's helped us while we wait. All of the things we hoped we would do with it, we've done.
Great.
And it's now our kind of route to continuous progress. We can scale it up. There's so much more we can do. It was commissioned by Buckinghamshire Council, led to even further growth. The stamp of approval from a local authority was also a huge high for the team. And the other thing I think that has been a continuous something I've been proud of is when we retain good staff. We've got staff who've been with us for a long time and they're still there.
It's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, retaining great people feels like a huge achievement every year. It's a challenging space to keep people interested, to help them to not get overcome by the demands of the job. So to offer a supportive environment, a nice workplace culture, that feels like a huge something I'm very proud of. I don't do it it's not entirely down to me, but I certainly lead that. And I'm always delighted when we keep great people. And then when we find more great people is another great thing. So finding people and keeping them is just so good. And honestly, always meet great people. I've met amazing people in this job. And it's been, and so when new partnerships are formed, that's something to be proud of too. Because we couldn't do it on our own, any charity. We're rooted in the community and those partnerships are key to us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great. 2 great answers then. So the platform and then the staff retention, the community that you've built around the work you do.
It's
So
amazing.
that's great. Yeah. Thank you for that. So in terms of the therapy side of things, because obviously you mentioned the nursery side. So the therapy side of things, does that happens in a different environment, in a different setting? Does it happen remotely, online? How does that all work?
Yeah, so we take the service to the children. So usually that would be in their homes, their own environment. We observe them there. And we would provide a program of therapies so maybe 6 to 12, depending on the needs of the children over a
Mhm.
period of time. We'll look at needs when we assess, and our team are either made up of occupational therapists or speech and language therapists, and they come alongside the child, either, like say, in their home or in school,
Mhm.
to deliver that support and to help with a particular area of need, or we'd set goals together with the child and the family. So that's how that works. And it's individualized to the children. That team also provide services in schools, so working with families, but also not families, rather teaching staff. So they work with teaching staff in schools to support adjustments in classrooms and wider understanding of neurodiversity.
So, Sarah, over the last 25 years, how has the need for specialist early autism support changed, and what are you seeing either from a local level or from a local
Mm.
authority solutions? What are you seeing, and how are they supporting you?
So demand goes up every year. I think there's certainly there's more awareness of autism. Autism has
Hmm.
become more widely understood. It has led to more people seeking a diagnosis. So
Okay.
the pressure that has created on this kind of diagnostic pathway is very
Mm.
real, and it's a real challenge for families to navigate. Uh,
Hmm.
it confuses things sometimes because for families it doesn't always change the outcome.
Hmm.
But of course, they have the right to take that pathway. And there's a huge number of people we know who have been helped by having a diagnosis, and so
Mm.
the right to continue on that pathway to seek one should very much be there for families. But it
Hmm.
does create this very uncomfortable bottleneck for people, though, because while they wait. And that's changed
Hmm.
the profile of need, I guess. That didn't used to be so intense. What we try and do in response to that, because that doesn't change the way we deliver our service. We've always been
Hmm.
needs led. We have
Hmm.
never expected a diagnosis of a child. We just looked at the way they present, and if we can help them, then we will. But what we do always try and do is stay abreast of the current situation and help people to navigate it, and help
Mm.
to kind of manage expectation around what an outcome of a diagnosis may bring and how that may change services or support that becomes available, because it doesn't always lead to having support. A
Mm.
child may be diagnosed, but it doesn't then automatically mean that the support they'll get in school will suddenly be different. So it's so important that we help families to navigate that and to understand that.
Are there any sort of myths about autism generally, or early supports in autism, that you'd most like to challenge for parents or schools or policymakers? The things that you might hear too often and kind of think, I wish people wouldn't say that.
Well, it's commonly, the phrase is often coined kind of, we're all a bit autistic, or
Mhm.
there was no autism in my day.
Mhm.
There was none of that when I was at school.
Mhm.
But actually, there probably was
Mhm.
absolutely children with autism, autistic children in every classroom that we all were a part of. But the term wasn't frequently used
Mhm.
until probably the mid or even late 90s, I would think. It's probably only been in the last 2 decades that it's been commonly
Mhm.
used
Mhm.
to describe somebody's needs or difference. The shift that we hope to see more of is recognition of a kind of difference, not deficit model.
Yeah.
To try and see the perspective as autism being a neurodevelopmental difference, but it's not a deficit. For some people, it can create challenges with everyday
Mm.
things, but it's
Mhm.
a difference. Their brain function is but that's what it is. It's different. It's not, there's not a better way to have, there's not a better brain or a normal brain. The word no, I don't try, I avoid using normal as a description of anything really. I don't feel it's a very, it doesn't do a lot of who decides what normal is, I guess.
Mm. I know you don't like using the word like deficiency or deficits. I sometimes see the opposite, that I see this kind of superpower that these individuals have. Is that the case across the board? Are there distinct features and things that come out in nature of people with autism that make them sort of more able in other areas that some of
Can
us just
do.
don't benefit?
Yeah, it can
Yeah.
do. Um, and yeah, I mean, some people are comfortable with the superpower terminology, and
Mm.
it's frequently used. I think with that, we kind of just need to be mindful of um, those people who feel that can, I guess, remove the importance of recognizing the challenges that can come with some of those differences.
Yeah.
And there are people who need support and help to access everyday life.
Mm.
And so it therefore is very, very different for some people. And that's why really the spectrum reference is still
Mm.
relevant.
Okay. Yeah.
Less
Yeah.
frequently is it fully described as autism spectrum
That's true.
disorder, and the disorder is less frequently used, but actually the spectrum still has a place.
Mm.
It can be very, very different. Every single person's autism is different and is unique to them.
As an organisation, you also offer consultative services to schools. So, is there anything that sort of surprises you about what mainstream settings still need to learn? You've talked about the spectrum side of things and the language and differentiation. Are there any things that you're picking up from your engagement interaction with mainstream settings that you think actually there's still some work to do there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intention from schools is there to support children. That's by the nature of their provision. That's what they want to do, but often they're working in environments that may not be suitable for those complex needs that some of those children present with. There's certainly an ambition to know more and to become more proficient at being able to support every child's needs, but that can be very, very challenging. It can be very
Mm.
challenging. And if you're in charge of if you're teaching a classroom of 30 children, meeting all of those needs on limited budgets, limited resources can be very difficult. And I have friends who've been in teaching for 3 decades, and classrooms are very different than
Mhm.
they used to be. The needs of children
Mhm.
are becoming more complex, and the way they present the curriculum has had to change and needs to change. And actually, this latest round of education reform is significant and is greatly needed.
Mm.
The implementation of it is yet to be ironed out. It's
Mm.
very bold and ambitious, and it's, I think for teachers and in schools that can appear very daunting. How they are expected to deliver on some of those things will be difficult.
Can you give me some of the sort of features that stand out for you that are being, some of the things that are being introduced within the curriculum that you think, well, that's really good, or, these are worth highlighting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I think I'm yet to it's very early days, so the reform is
Mhm.
yet to be implemented. Some of it is still under consultation. But the shift is to see an increasing number of schools or classrooms to become able to support children with special educational needs.
Mhm.
And there's a long strides, and there's still a long way to go for every school to be able to do that. And there is always a need for specialist support, and there's always a need for specialist provision. There will be children whose needs won't be able to be met in those
Mhm.
environments.
Mhm.
Individualized support will still be needed. What's not clear, I guess, is how much of that provision is expected to be met in school and how much of that
Mm.
will still be in specialist services. But families feel uncomfortable about it because, a lot of families feel that they're concerned about the current provision that their child has in place. There's questions over how the EHCPs will be delivered. There's no doubt about it. The current system is creating huge drains on services in terms of the or in terms of there's a need for EHCPs, but currently local authorities' budgets are being under incredible strain because they can't meet
Mm.
need through
Mm.
the current processes. They're struggling to deliver it, and so it does need to be reformed. But what families are fearful of is that the support that their child needs may be taken away. And there's still a lot of mapping out around that to be done. It's not clear yet how that's going to land, really. I think
Interesting
there's an
sort of watch this space.
understanding that something needs to change, but
Mhm.
there's a huge amount of support still needed for those children. So it has to be delivered
Mm.
somewhere, if not through EHCPs.
Great, thank you for that. Obviously, Autism Early Support is a charity, and there are certain features of a charity that you'll see in every charity. So sometimes there's a fundraising arm, and sometimes you have to be able to demonstrate impact to be able to then achieve more funding and that sort of thing. Do those sorts of things exist in your setting? Do you have to do some fundraising? Is
Yes,
impact
very much so.
important?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So we
Mhm.
have all of those traditional fundraising mechanisms in place, and we are highly dependent on them every year. It's still probably, yes, probably close to being 50% of our income dependency is on
Okay, that's
voluntary
quite
income.
significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've tried to take the pressure off some of that by introducing services like that are paid for. So some of the portal services are paid for, some of our therapy services are paid for. But primarily, we subsidise all of those services. So we always need to fundraise. We rely on trusts and foundations. We rely on the community, people running marathons and doing all of those amazing things.
Mm.
Events, we sometimes organise our own events, but sporadically. We do them for special occasions, really. So we've got a ball on our 25th anniversary. But our
Mm.
team's very small. But yes, very much so we rely on fundraising.
Yeah. And in terms of impact, how do you measure that? And because it's very difficult, because you're dealing with, as you said, children with a variety of different challenges, all at different stages and different levels. What measurements are in place? Is it progress, or what sort of things are you measuring,
So
if at all, and how important is it?
yeah, I mean we do a lot of um, qualitative surveys. We map families. We talk to them as they come in. We get insight from their learning and their progress as a family, I guess. So maybe we look at whole family well-being. So if a family becomes more able to find strategies that they can try at home. Maybe sleep patterns become a bit more regular. Maybe they can improve communication, etc.
Hmm.
All of those are measures that we look at when we're looking at
Mm.
impact. Ways that we've helped a family to become more able to feel empowered, or we've
Hmm.
given them more knowledge, or their child is able to regulate using some tools and some strategies that we've recommended, then all of those are impact measures that we look at.
Mm. Mm.
A family may come to us and say, I'd really like to be able to go on holiday next year and help my child face a train journey, say.
Hmm.
And if they manage to do that with some tools in place and with some supports, then that's a great measure of impact if we played a part in that.
Great. And without obviously breaking confidence, is there a family story from your time at AS that reminds you why your work really matters? I'm sure there are probably hundreds, but there's any particular ones that stand out for you?
Yes, I mean, we have families who will be able to move from wondering whether their child would ever be able to access a classroom environment, and then with some support, gradual support, and work of a key worker, then we would see that child evolve into being able to struggle to get out the car and into the nursery, to be able to play independently, to be able to say goodbye to mum at the gate, and then progress into primary school. And then we get reports from primary school that, they're engaging across all sorts of using different communication tools. They're actively
Mm,
engaged in school. And
mm,
then, family might send us a picture and there they are, and they've had another baby and they're on holiday
mm,
together. And
mm.
it may Matt sounds it's not a specific family. There's lots of different families' journeys weaved
Yeah.
into that. But,
Of course.
people keep in touch with us. We do have
Mm,
and alumni of families who send us photographs and give us updates when new babies arrive or little, big milestones in their family stories. They share those with us.
and I suppose from a charity perspective, nurturing those relationships and holding on to those stories, that's quite fundamental in terms of
Absolutely.
getting the
Yeah, it is.
support you
It
need. Yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously there are times when things don't go according to
Mm.
plan. Things can be more challenging and you need a degree of resilience. How do you sort of handle those moments when things are more difficult? Do you have sort of coping strategies for dealing with those more
Me
challenging moments? I'm
personally,
sure there are.
or as an
Yeah, I think so.
organisation?
Yeah, as a leader. Yeah, yeah.
So I think that network of support is really key for me. I guess I would assess the situation fully, step back from it. And then I always operate with that 100% transparency. So
Mm,
I would be sharing instantly or, very quickly, I'd be pulling together a picture and sharing it with our board, with my exec, and we would be looking at those situations together as a whole. We'd be
mm,
looking at them as a collective, always open around reviewing situations and wondering how we could change them or prevent things from happening again. We
mhm,
have a pretty close review of managing risk and assessing risk, etc. But of course, things do go off course. So, it might be that you're pretty sure you were going to get a pot of funding and it doesn't come in, and we do have to remain agile. I think what I have come to know is that things will continually change.
mm,
I think my expectations of the speed of change has altered. I have to be
mhm,
patient around decisions that others are making, but I've become pragmatic, logical.
mhm,
I take things step by step. I do worry. I do spend a lot of
mm,
time, overthinking, I guess, on certain points. And I always
mm,
feel that the answer to that is to then to map things out. Sometimes I'll use visual maps. Sometimes I'll, go back to the kind of pen and paper stuff.
mm,
Mm. But I think that critically, it's about having a feeling that you are supported in an environment, that you're in a kind of no blame situation.
mm,
We have open dialogue. We share information widely. And we
mhm,
keep that pattern of communication open at all times to prevent
mm,
surprises. So we're ready for the things that look like they could be going to cause us problems.
mm,
And I very much do all of that as a collective. Yeah. And I would encourage everybody else to do the same, that
mm,
we open, we talk, we share,
mm.
and most things you work towards you can find solutions with.
You strike me as a very sort of approachable and accessible leader that somebody wouldn't feel nervous about coming to you
Yeah,
with
I hope I
challenges or
am.
issues and that.
I hope I am.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I look back on my own career and I see the points where I've had people who I would describe as people I looked up to or people who
Mm,
but then also times where I didn't really have a great mentor at some key times in
Mm.
my career. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the things I can do to people that I work with.
Mm.
I can be that role. I can help them
Mhm.
to develop in their roles.
Mm.
And I recognize where that would have been really helpful for me. I think I've
Mhm.
been self-taught in a lot of ways, but where I can help my team to be as good as they can be, then I do that. I see that as being a really key part of my job.
And then you obviously talked earlier on about having sort of low turnover and staff turnover and things like that. I think that's all interconnected in one way or another, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think certainly in those fundraising roles,
Mhm.
there's they we've had turnover in that area,
Mm.
but I don't think we've been. I think it's very similar to the rest of the sector. I think some of those jobs are fairly hard to secure for any period of time. Kind of 2-year
Mm.
average tends to be
Mm.
quite typical. I'm hoping we're always improving on that, and that every time we do have a departure, then we kind of go, okay, let's have a look at this. Maybe we could
Mm.
do things differently. Have we got the structure right? Have we got the role right? So we do that a lot. We're remapping all of those things.
Mm. Great. That's really interesting. Um, Looking sort of 3 to 5 years ahead, what are Autism Early Support's big priorities beyond the sort of 25th anniversary? Obviously, you've had a great build up to the 25 years, and now you're going into the next 30, into the next 5, next 10. What does that look like for you?
So we've always, in the past, part of our legacy was that, especially in those early years of the early years sector and the providing of specialist support in an early years environment, we were always often seen as pioneering. Where people would come to us from
Mm.
all over the place, across the world, actually, to
Mm.
look at our
Right.
practice.
Well. Mhm.
So to be at the forefront of best practice, to continue to pioneer,
Mm.
I guess becomes a little bit more challenging now because the offer of support is becoming more available. But for
Mhm.
us, standards and quality have got to be we're guided by that. We want to be always leaders in best practice. We want to
Mhm.
be able to be the providers of the best quality support that we can do. So that means we want to always attract talent. We all want to always retain the brilliant people that we've got and invest in them. And we want to continually learn and remain, professionally curious and to be
Mm.
completely purpose driven. To learn
Mm.
from the children and families that we support, which we always have, and we continue to always want to do that, so that our service is meeting their needs. And those needs are
Mhm.
evolving. Society is evolving rapidly. Look at the last
Mhm.
5, 10 years in terms of the way children access information.
Mm.
It's completely different. It's completely different,
Mm.
and it's changing all of the time. So we need to stay at the forefront of that.
And there's talk at the moment of reducing the access that young people have to digital
Mm,
technology in the
mm.
classroom. Is that a step in the right direction, or do you have a view on whether that's the right thing to do, or what are your views on that?
Think I I think there's definitely a space for continued personal interaction in those 0 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Screen use with caution, I would be advocate for personally.
Mhm.
Continue with books and toys and
Mm.
traditional access to tangible stuff, things that develop imagination and
Mm.
enable children to learn with tactile things, and to give
Mhm.
give children a lot of choice in those early years of play
Mhm.
equipment and interaction with others, if according to their preferences. I mean, all children will gravitate to certain things that they like,
Mm.
but I personally feel like that digital stuff can wait till later.
Yeah.
There's a school of thought that would say that children are always going to use technology and need to use it, learn to use it. The sooner they learn, the better they'll be at it. Actually, there's so
Mm.
much evidence to say that technology is super easy to use. You find a way to use it pretty quickly if you need to use it. And hey, you become
Mhm.
a super user in no time because everybody's got a mobile
Mhm.
phone, and hey, we can all find our way into an app and how to use it.
Mhm.
I think that
Mhm.
interaction with toys and experiences and people around them is really key for young children, personally.
And is that more important for the children that you're working with, or is it the same? It doesn't. There's no difference. The interaction and the tangible things.
Yeah, I think those range of experiences, as long as children don't become dysregulated and uncomfortable and upset, you know, enabling them to access all of those different things is
Mhm.
something we work towards. And but we find children who will have definite preferences for quiet space, will have
Mhm.
intolerances for because of their sensory differences, intolerance for
Mhm.
noise and overstimulation. So that would need to be moderated according to the needs of the child. Um, but those early years in particular, I do think there's a huge amount of scope to give children that range of choices if they can cope with them and they enjoy them.
Just going back to the leadership side of things, use that word that you're not that keen on using yourself as a charity CEO. For those aspiring CEOs who
Mm.
are listening, what's your one piece of advice about specialist early years work that you might want to pass on to an aspiring charity leader in your specific area of the sector?
I think it comes naturally if you're cause driven, is the truth.
Mhm.
If let's say my why was our
Mhm.
families, if
Mhm.
you find a cause that drives you, you'll find the means to be able to, you find the skills from lots of other sources.
Mhm.
I think that the drive and the purpose is
Mhm.
fundamental.
Mhm.
I definitely think in this role, you have a natural interest in others,
Mhm.
active listening and being interested in other perspectives
Yeah.
is pretty key part.
Mhm.
Surrounding yourself with people who are specialists is an
Mhm.
amazing kind of by the process of osmosis.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
even know if that is the scientific term, but we kind of get the reference to it.
Yeah.
You learn through in that environment, where
Mm.
there's um, a specialist service being offered, you learn from those people who provide it. I think consistency is key in a role like
Mhm.
mine. You show up, you set out the goalposts, and you continue to aim towards them, and you show up
Mhm.
consistently,
Mhm.
and you acknowledge all the steps that we're making towards progress. And you
Mm.
just aspire to be kind of gradually better all the time, that
Mm.
call out great stuff, recognize when things are really working well,
Mhm.
in a spotlight on the stuff that can go missed, the little things that can get
Mm.
missed. Celebrate the little wins as much as the big wins.
Mm.
Thank people often. I think that's a really key part. Thanking people for
Mm.
the things that they didn't even know they did,
Mm.
and taking time to reflect on things as well is a key bit. I
Mm.
make sure I reflect on progress, and I look back at I go back to where we were hoping to be, and I check in on where that is and whether we've got there, and if we haven't, why we haven't, and does it still matter? So a good strategy is key.
Mm.
We've got a fairly simple strategy, I would say.
Mhm.
It's got 4 key pillars as our main aims.
Mhm.
Out those, there's the objectives behind those aims, and then we've got a set of initiatives. They're okay, how are we going to do these things? And
Mm.
it's stood us well. I mean, it has stood us well, and those aims, they're firmly in place for me. We review them often, the teams see them. People's objectives, personal objectives are feeding into our aims. So it does feel as though no matter what we're doing, we're all mapping towards the same goals.
Yeah.
And new opportunities come in,
Mm.
but I think it's important to not have a complete change of direction because of them.
Mm. So that consistency is really
Consistency is
important.
so important. So people know where they're at as well, and so they know where they stand with us all. I think the other key around being a CEO is having that relationship with the board who are also purpose driven like you are. The transparency of information, the regularity of communication, the open dialogue,
Mm.
the alerts to risks,
Mhm.
So I think managing that relationship with the board or building a positive relationship with the board is really key. And
Mm.
I have been particularly fortunate, I would say, in that I've had a very supportive board since I arrived.
That's good.
Yeah, and that has definitely helped.
Yeah. It gives you strength and support when you need it, doesn't it?
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really useful. Thank you very much. So much of that resonated with me, particularly the thing about gratitude and that thanking thing, because I've
Yeah.
experienced that from previous leaders, and it does make a really big difference. I think I don't think people really
Mm.
realise what a big difference those small things make, or what seemingly seem like small things.
Yeah.
Well, we've moved into the sort of final part of the interview and moving into the sort of quick fire question round. Could you give us, and you might not have an answer to this, so don't worry if you haven't. What's the best book you've read on either leadership, neurodiversity, or parenting that you think is worth sharing for those that are
Mm.
listening? Any in particular that stand
Well,
out?
when my own children were growing up, I read a
Mm.
book by Stephen Biddulph called Raising Boys.
Oh
And
yeah.
actually, it would be interesting to go back to it now because I wonder if my perspectives have changed. But at the
Hmm.
time, so my own children were born very close together. I've got 3 boys,
Mm. Yeah.
and there's 2.5 years between my eldest and my twins. So
Okay.
very quickly, my husband and I went from having no children to suddenly we
Hmm.
had 3 children, all under the age of 3. And we were like, oh, wow, we've
Mm.
got all these boys. How do we manage them? And he particularly felt that as well. As a man raising boys, what does that look like? He'd grown up with a sister and I'd grown up with a sister and brother. So this felt all very different. And at the time, Steve Biddulph's approach made so much sense to us. It was
Hmm.
nurturing. It mapped out a lot of relationships that made sense to boys growing up. And actually I've
Hmm.
referred to it a lot
Mm.
as the boys were growing up. So I loved that. But I do think I need to reflect on it. And I wonder actually it would be interesting whether it wasn't about parenting, it was about boys' perspectives on the world and what
Mm.
that could look like. So I enjoyed that. On neurodiversity, there's a whole range. There's a book by there's all sorts of let me think of one that I particularly. So there's a book called We're All Neurodiverse. That's pretty good.
Mm.
Um and that is great for understanding the difference between, say, neurodiversity and neurodivergent. Uh,
Mm.
I pick up books from time to time that the team give me, but I've gone back to that one a lot. There's a book by Barry Prezant called Uniquely Human. That's pretty good.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure I pop these in the list at the
Yeah.
bottom.
And on
If you're
leadership,
interviewing.
when I took this role, I liked Find Your Why actually by Simon Sinek. I really like
Okay,
that.
that's definitely
Find
one
Your
I'll
Why
pop in the
is
list.
really good. It's not specifically about leadership, but it is about business and, being purposeful around your mission and when you're
Mm.
building an organization. I do like
Mhm.
Simon Sinek, actually. I listen to his podcast now. But I read a book when I took this job, which was called Your First 90 Days as
All right.
when you take on a senior role, when you become a chief exec. I would need to look
Mhm.
up who wrote it. But actually, it was the closest I've come to using a kind of business sort of self-help
Mm.
kind of guide. It was so
Mm.
good. It was so good.
Mm.
It probably isn't
Yeah.
very difficult to find it all. It was for the first 90 days, and it was just around, stakeholder relationship, getting under the skin of the organization,
Mhm.
understanding what makes people tick, all of those things that
Mhm.
resonated with me. But
Mhm.
I guess my leadership style is built on kind of people first. My
Mm.
metrics are people, I guess. And
Was that inspired by anyone in particular, any particular leader or
I think it's
charity
just
leader?
my
Or
natural disposition.
yeah.
I like being around people.
Mm.
I like people, I guess.
That's great. Are you a night owl or an early bird, would you say?
Do you know what? I'm a bit both.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I am a bit both. I don't have huge amounts
Mm.
of sleep,
Mm.
but yeah, I would say
Yeah.
I'm a bit of
A few
both.
people have said that. Mhm. What's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self starting in the charity sector? Anything that you kind of learned, you think, I wish I'd known that
Yeah, I could
20
have
years ago.
had. I suppose I was a slow starter.
Mm.
And then back to that point about
Mm.
mentorship. I think if
Mm.
I'd had mentors at an earlier
Mhm.
stage in my journey,
Mhm.
then I would have grown quicker and I would have had more self-belief
Yeah.
sooner.
So maybe take that step into leadership earlier, knowing what you know now. Is that what you're
Yeah, I
saying?
think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I could have.
Yeah.
I always worked with great people in every team that I
Mm.
worked with. I was always
Mm.
in the company of great people, and I feel really
Mm.
fortunate in that sense. But I think it was that mentorship role that could have given me that self-belief to have done more sooner.
So, for those listeners who've been sort of touched or moved by the conversation, or it's resonated in some way, and they want to kind of support the organisation as a charity
Yeah,
or in other
yeah,
ways, what could they do as their next step? How could they find out more? Is there somewhere they can go? Is there something they should do?
absolutely. So you'll find us online, autismearlysupport.org.uk.
Hmm.
We always need people who
Hmm.
can share their skills and who can share their time.
Hmm.
We are currently recruiting trustees, and we're particularly interested in talking to people who may be parents of neurodivergent children
Okay.
of any ages. So we do have trustee vacancies right now. We continually need strategic partners. So
Mm.
partners who may be interested in championing our cause, who may be able
Hmm.
to connect us with people where we may be able to develop longer term strategic partnerships.
Mm.
But equally, we also need one-off support. We
Mm.
welcome people who want to come and maybe spend the summer with us, do some
Mm.
volunteering as a step on to
Hmm.
something else, or who want to
Mm.
do some fundraising in all of the usual ways.
Hmm.
All of those things are on our website, but we are open to talking to people all of the time. If our cause is
Great.
something that's close to their heart, then we would love a conversation.
All right, message is loud and clear. So, what's the website address they should go
It's
to?
autismearlysupport.org.uk.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Sarah, thank you so much for giving me your time and for sharing your stories so openly. If listeners want to learn more about the service and support and the charity, I'd really encourage you to and explore that site. There's lots of information there that will help you work out what you do next. And if you're a charity leader listening in and you'd like to come on the podcast to talk about your own why, I'd love to hear from you. So please get in touch. This series is all about honest conversations with people who are making a difference, which Sarah definitely is, and reflecting on what drives them and what their purpose is and where their why comes from. So please do follow, subscribe, and share the podcast if you've enjoyed this conversation. It really helps us reach more listeners and continue to bring these stories to life. Next time on Night Owl Philanthropy, I'll be joined by Graham Duxbury, who's the Chief Executive of Groundwork, where we'll be exploring how that charity works with communities to improve local places, support people, and create positive environmental and social changes. So thank you very much, Sarah. Until next time, take care.